We got some absolute massive news that's coming out by the Las Vegas Raiders. They have officially released their quarterback, Gardner Minshew. Tom Pelissero has officially put it out there that the Raiders have informed quarterback Gardner Minshew that they'll release him when the new league year begins next Wednesday, per sources. Minshew has 46 career starts and is still only 28 years old. An experienced option is available. To me, this is very, very interesting because for the Raiders, you're moving off the quarterback that you went into last season with. And more than just moving off that quarterback, you're saving cap. And we already know what Pete Carroll and John Spytek have kind of told us, right? These guys have said that we want to basically go into this next season. We want to bring in competition. We want to try to get that veteran quarterback. Now, at least that's kind of what we've been hearing as well, right? Matthew Stafford's an option for the Raiders. At least he was the guy the Raiders wanted, right? Tom Brady met with Matthew Stafford. And now they're pivoting towards Sam Darnold, which is another report we heard a lot about. Justin Fields has been tied to the Raiders. Russell Wilson has been tied to the Raiders. And moving off of Gardner Minshew just made sense at this point for the Raiders, right? Because you're moving off a guy and you're saving about $6 million in cap space, right? So the Raiders, who would have paid Gardner Minshew about $13 million for this next season, will end up eating $7 of those $13 million, and they'll be able to save $6. So the Raiders do end up getting a little bit of cap space, right? Now, let's talk about what this move actually means for the Raiders as we kind of go forward. Thinking back to last year, if you guys remember when Tom Telesco came to the Raiders, Tom Telesco had an opportunity, right? He had an opportunity where you have the 13th overall pick. You're really a quarterback away, right? To a quarterback that could actually get the ball to someone like Davante, could get the ball to someone like Jacoby. The Raiders were in a pretty good spot, right? We had the number one defense coming into last season. We're in a really, really good spot. And Tom Telesco brought in Gardner Minshew. And the plan, from my understanding, was that Gardner Minshew was supposed to be the backup veteran quarterback to a rookie, right? The same way he was to Trevor Lawrence, the same way he was to Anthony Richardson. He was supposed to come to the Raiders and be that backup quarterback for that for that rookie, right? And it never worked out for the Raiders, right? The Falcons ended up surprising everyone and taking a quarterback. You had 5 other teams that took quarterbacks. The Raiders ended up missing out on a quarterback, and then they had to kind of pivot to Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell as the option for the season. And the Raiders clearly did not want to do that last year, right? But people think Tom Telesco was fired for this decision right here. The fact he was not able to actually land that quarterback, people think Tom Telesco was ultimately fired for that. Now, one of the interesting things as the Raiders kind of go forward is they're going to have to figure out who that next quarterback is, right? You do save $6 million by releasing Gardner Minshew. And I should say this, the release is not actually official. It'll be official next Wednesday. But Gardner Minshew has already been told by John Spytek, we are releasing you, right? The transaction will just process when Wednesday actually comes around. One of the interesting things with Gardner Minshew as we kind of go forward, and the Raiders, generally speaking, is, if they were going to go out there and say, we're going to get a rookie quarterback, bringing in a rookie quarterback means you want to have a veteran quarterback to help develop that guy, right? You bring a rookie in, you have a guy that's older, that's been in the NFL, that can kind of help mold that quarterback, teach them some of the positives around the NFL, teach them how to watch tape. And the fact that the Raiders released Gardner Minshew tells me there's a good chance the Raiders aren't going down that direction of rookie quarterbacks. To me, there's a good chance the Raiders are going to actually end up going with the veteran option. And that's also kind of something they've been hinting at, right? They went all in with Tom Brady. They tried landing this guy. They went all in with Matthew Stafford by having Tom Brady meet with him. They met in Montana, right? They kind of did their thing. Obviously, it never worked out for the Raiders, but the Raiders still went down that path where they're trying to bring in Matthew Stafford, right? They're aggressive about it. Now we're hearing they're going all in for a guy like Sam Darnold, right? They're being aggressive about that as well, and we'll see how that kind of pans out. We talked about it yesterday. Sam Darnold is obviously going to end up being a free agent. The Raiders are going down that veteran route, and it almost makes sense why they released Gardner Minshew, right? You don't need him if you're not going to bring in a rookie quarterback. Plus, you're also bringing in a different veteran quarterback. Now, it'll be interesting to see what veteran quarterback that actually is for the Raiders. Russell Wilson's available, who has worked with Pete Carroll in the past. Justin Fields is available. Fields still has a ton of upside. Obviously, Fields, he hasn't really developed, but you never know what a quarterback can develop into, year 4, 5, and 6. You also got guys like Aaron Rodgers, right? Rodgers is 41 years old. And yes, Rodgers is at the end of his career, but last year he was recovering from an injury. This year he's 100% healthy. And the fact that his salary cap is fairly low for the Raiders going into this next season, that could make a ton of sense for the Raiders as well. And that doesn't include some of the other veteran options. There's guys like Josh Dobbs and Not saying we're going to go in for Josh Jacobs, but there are guys like that available as well, right? Hendon Hooker is reportedly supposed to be released this season as well. So there are options like that available for the Raiders if they go down that path. And of course, you still have Aiden O'Connell. I don't think Aiden O'Connell's the guy, right? I always have to kind of make that known. But they still do technically have Aiden O'Connell. And I would think that, hey, if you bring in Justin Fields, AOC will still get to compete with Justin Fields. And if Aiden O'Connell has a phenomenal offseason, better than what we saw this past season, right? Obviously, he ended up not being able to beat out Gardner Minshew for the job. But if he has a good offseason, Aiden O'Connell can actually end up starting, right? But of course, that would also depend on the quarterback. I think he competes with a guy like Justin Fields. But if you bring in Aaron Rodgers or you pay Sam Darnold, then it's going to be those guys' job ultimately to lose. And I don't think they would lose at that point. But the Raiders have released Gardner Minshew. I think it makes a lot of sense based off the salary cap and the direction that this team is trying to go. You also have Aiden O'Connell under contract, right? Keep in mind, we drafted him, so he still has 2 years under contract for the Raiders. So as we kind of go forward, he'll be under contract. We have Carter Bradley under contract as well, although that's kind of a minimum contract based off the fact that he wasn't drafted. And then the Raiders just have to figure out who that third quarterback is. We'll figure it out. I do want to switch focus and get into something that the Raiders superstar defensive end Maxx Crosby said. And I think this is kind of interesting. I'm going to let you guys listen into it, and we'll just talk about it on the other side.
But it's a first year off an Achilles is one of the hardest things to do. You've seen it happen with Kirk. Kirk had a down year. It happened with Aaron. I mean, he struggled, like you said, early on, but he got better as the season went. I think with all the doubt and all the negativity around Aaron Rodgers, he needs to retire, things like that, he's getting cut by the Jets. I think he's going to come back and have I know he's 42 or 41.
Are you going to say MVP?
No, I think he's going to have a big year this year, and I hope it's in our town.
I love it.
So there you guys have it, right? Maxx Crosby on his podcast a couple days back is basically hinting that he wants Aaron Rodgers to come to the Las Vegas Raiders. And you know what's interesting about Maxx Crosby saying that is that we know Maxx Crosby wants to win now. He's made it very, very, very clear this offseason that he has to know the plan. He has to know what's coming with the Raiders, and he has to agree to that, right? Or he might ultimately request a trade, right? He has made that clear that he might request a trade if things aren't 100% tuned to what he thinks will allow the Raiders to win now. You know, if the Raiders go all in on a rookie quarterback, that's 2-3 years down the line kind of thinking. If they go all in on a veteran quarterback, that means they're trying to win today. And to me, Aaron Rodgers, right, the fact that Maxx Crosby is mentioning Aaron Rodgers means to me that Maxx Crosby actually knows the plan. And he actually does know the plan, right? He said that he's spoken to Spytek and he agrees with kind of what the Raiders are doing at this point. And the fact that Maxx Crosby wants Aaron Rodgers tells me that might be the veteran quarterback that he prefers, right? Justin Fields is available. Russell Wilson's available. Sam Darnold's available. Aaron Rodgers might be the guy that Maxx Crosby wants, right? And to me, we also have to, just kind of take a step back and think about this. If the Raiders say, hey, we're going to go into this next season with the rookie quarterback and Aiden O'Connell, well, Aiden O'Connell start, and then the rookie quarterback develops, and we'll see if he can just naturally kind of take over. If that doesn't work, right, and Maxx Crosby doesn't even agree with that, and it doesn't work, that Maxx Crosby might request a trade. And we also have to realize if you go in with the rookie and Aiden O'Connell, that's long-term thinking. Maxx Crosby could easily come in there and say, I don't agree with this plan. I'm not waiting 3 years, 4 years. Trade me, right? I'm no longer going to be here with the Raiders. And I know some people are going to disagree and say Max would not do that. And I would hope that he never does that, but you can't be 100% sure that Maxx Crosby wouldn't necessarily do that. Of course, he wants to win for the Raiders. He wants to win with this team. But I think he also wants to win, right? And I think he also kind of understands that, he's not going to play football, past 10 years, right? He's not going to play forever. He has a certain point where his body's going to start to break down like every great superstar. And I think Maxx Crosby kind of understands what he wants with the Raiders. And I think we have like 3-4 years to figure it out, right? Or not figure it out, but I think we have like 3-4 years to go all in and try to win. And if we don't, I think the Raiders are going to have to start a rebuild at some point. Similar to the way the Bears did, right? They bring in Ryan Poles. He, gets rid of guys like Roquan Smith. He gets rid of some of those wide receivers that they had at that point. They kind of start this rebuild. They sell all the assets that they had. And they start from step one, and it's taken them like 4 or 5 years, but they're in a really, really good spot at this point. But that's like 5 years later. Maxx Crosby's not waiting 5 years, right? So we'll see what ends up happening. We have some other news that has also kind of come out. The Jets yesterday have officially released Davante Adams, which saves him $29 million against the cap. This is a very, very interesting thing that has kind of happened. Now, we already knew, right? This is not new. We've already known Davante Adams was going to be released, but it became official as of yesterday. At least that he was told that he would be released, right? And it's interesting to think that the Raiders had Davante Adams. We traded a first, we traded a second. We had him for about 2.5 years. We got good production at him, right? We kind of went in with the Derek Carr year one. That didn't work. We pivoted to Jimmy G. That didn't work. And then we went into this past year with Gardner Minshew, and obviously Davante was unhappy with kind of what had happened up to that point, and he didn't want to be with the Raiders anymore. The Raiders not only traded Davante and got out of his contract, but we got a 3rd round pick for this guy. Think about that. 3rd round pick. I don't think people recognize how valuable a 3rd round pick is. Just because the Raiders have historically sucked ass at drafting, 3rd round picks are very, very, very valuable. Right? Some of the best defensive linemen, offensive linemen in the NFL are 3rd round picks. Right? Oso Odighizuwa just got paid. He was a 3rd round pick. Right? The Raiders have brought in guys. It's not a 3rd round pick, but like Jackson Powers-Johnson is an elite player. He was a 2nd round pick. Trey Smith, I think he's like a 4th or 5th round pick. Right? If you draft well, if you're a smart general manager, a 3rd round pick could potentially bring you in a superstar caliber player. Right? To me, the Raiders being able to get a 3rd round pick for a guy, I don't even know how old Davante is. He's like 32, 33 years old. The fact that we got out of that contract and got a 3rd round pick, the Raiders absolutely fleeced the Jets. But it's also another thing we have to think about. The Jets said we're going to go all in. We're going to win with Aaron Rodgers. We got to get whatever this guy needs. Let's bring it in right now. And it never worked out for them. They gave up a 3rd round pick for Davante. They felt Davante could help get them over the top. Did not work out. The Jets fired their coach. Their entire season last year was lost. And now the Jets, who 2 or 3 years ago went all in to try to win that Super Bowl, did not work, are on the other side of that now, right? They don't have a quarterback. They have a lot of cap hits over the next 2 years for Davante, for Aaron Rodgers. They have a couple other guys that they've released or will release, right? Tyron Smith's another guy that'll probably become a free agent soon. The Jets are in a bad spot now, and it makes you think, if the Raiders take that same approach, is it possible that the Raiders end up in that same spot as the New York Jets, right? I agree that the Raiders should go all in, bring in Sam Darnold, bring in Aaron Rodgers. But if we go all in, this could be the other side of that, right? So it's just something to kind of think about. And then finally, the Raiders have signed guard Jordan Meredith to a 1-year contract worth a little over $1 million. The Raiders bring back Jordan Meredith, and I love the fact that he came back for just $1 million. Phenomenal signing for the Raiders. To me, this is one of the best backup guards you can have on your roster. The guy can play left guard, he can play right guard, he can play center. Jordan Meredith can kind of do all of it, right? And I think for the Raiders, this is an absolute perfect signing. I think the Raiders still have to get better on the interior. I think we got to get guys that are people movers. Ryan Poles, we'll just go back to him really quickly, has made 2 massive moves over the last 2 days, shoring up their offensive line. Yesterday, they traded a 6th round pick for Jonah Jackson, who was a Pro Bowl offensive lineman in 2023 with the Detroit Lions. He went to the Rams in 2024, got paid $17 million a year. He's one of the highest paid offensive linemen. And he got hurt after like week 2 with the Rams. He ended up getting hurt, missed most of the season. And then they ended up just trading him. They looked at it like, hey, we need to kind of get that salary cap, into a good spot. But, they had paid this guy. And now the Bears bring him in for basically a 6th round pick. Today, the Chicago Bears bring in Joe Thuney, right? They traded a 4th round pick for him. The Bears went from having an average interior offensive line to 2 Pro Bowl guards literally in back-to-back days. They traded a 4th round pick and a 6th round pick. Now, the guys are older. These are short-term investments, but they're still good investments because for the Bears, you're kind of shoring up that offensive line at this point. They have a top 5 right tackle in Darnell Wright. They have 2 good guards, left tackle, center. They'll figure that out as they kind of go forward. But these are the type of signings that the Raiders are making, right? Jordan Meredith is a good signing. It's a good backup player. But we need to go get our Joe Thuney. We need to go out there and get our Jonah Jackson. We need to go shore up our offensive line as well. And, I don't think it makes sense to say, hey, we're going to go all in and pay a guy $25 million at the guard position. That doesn't make sense. But if you can bring in Jonah Jackson, who's going to count $11 million against the cap for the next 2 years, that's a really, really good pickup for the Raiders. if you can go in and say, hey, Damian Lewis, who's one of the most physical guards in the NFL, one of the most, dominant players in the NFL at that guard position, if he costs 12.5, 13 million, let's bring him in. That makes sense, right? Those are the type of contracts that you give to guards, right? 8 to 13 million, but they got to be good, dominant, proven players. Jordan Meredith's a good pickup for 1 year, $1 million. It makes sense. I think he's a restricted free agent next year as well. So technically we'll be able to bring him back next year for a minimum contract. Once again, I think it'll be like $2 or $3 million next year if we wanted to keep him. But again, good backup offensive lineman, has a little bit of upside to potentially start. He's not a long-term starter to me right now, or at least he hasn't proven it. He's also not physical. He's also not a people mover. But I do like the contract because you are filling out those roster spots, right? We still need a backup guard no matter how you look at it, right? We still need a backup center no matter how you look at it, right? You have Dylan Parham, you have Jordan Meredith. I think Andre James at some point will be released or cut or potentially traded. But the Raiders are making a couple of moves. They also went out and gave Sam Webb a restriction, which if you want to essentially take him from the Raiders, you got to give us a draft pick. So the Raiders are making some moves, right? Might not be the flashy moves that a lot of people expected, but we'll see what ends up happening as we kind of go forward. Let me know what you guys think, man. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time with another video.